Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar on opening new business doors for agricultural transformation with focus on youth entrepreneurship in farm value chains and rural development. This webinar will be an hour and 30 minutes with speakers presenting their points of view in the first hour, followed by 20 minutes of Q&A and closing remarks. Speakers will be discussing opportunities, constraints, and challenges faced by youth entrepreneurs working in agribusiness in developing countries. My name is Nandita Srivastav, and I will be the moderator for this webinar. If you have any questions, please feel free to submit them in the question box in your side panel at any time. I will read these questions out during the Q&A session. Please note, this webinar will be recorded and the slides and the recording session of the webinar will be posted on the events page at ifpri.org. I will introduce each speaker as they come in. To begin, I'm pleased to introduce Simon Winter, who's the Executive Director of Syngenta Foundation for Sustainable Agriculture. He will reflect on how to bring youth in the development process, highlight a few global youth challenges, including a brief reflection on youth and COVID. With that, over to you, Simon.
Thanks, Nandita. Good morning, good afternoon, everybody. Good evening. Delighted to be here and joining you on this very important topic. Why is this an important topic for Syngenta Foundation for Sustainable Agriculture? We are an organization that is aiming to help entrepreneurial farmers who live in remote and low-income communities in Asia and Africa to advance their agricultural fortunes. And we seek to do this through a range of approaches to bringing better technologies close to and accessible and usable by those farmers, with the knowledge of how to use those technologies, and then with good access to markets, good access to finance, and so on. And these are all elements of this transformation that's needed. What's most important among these things is the access to knowledge and products close to the farmers, what is often called the last mile or first mile challenge, depending on whether you're distributing inputs or trying to supply your produce into output markets. And in order to close that last mile, we are very keen on finding young entrepreneurial people in those communities who can then become the agents of change, the change champions for their communities. So the notion of agricultural entrepreneurship is very important for us. In Africa, we are a co-founder and co-supporter of an initiative that's hosted by AGRF, the Africa Green Revolution Forum, called Generation Africa. In order to do our work, we not only develop the actual interventions, but we also look at the policy environments, the enabling environment. And IFPRI is a regular partner of ours in terms of examining policy issues like approaches to extension, approaches to mechanization, and other aspects of the enabling environment. The study that we're going to be showcasing today looks at policy, institutional, technological, and individual factors that can really unleash a new wave of young agricultural and rural entrepreneurship to tackle the challenges I alluded to. And there are 3 countries in the study: Nigeria, India, and Bangladesh. Today's symposium is focusing on the Nigeria case study. Why is this important in the world and not just to us as a foundation? Well, we all know that farmers across the world, not just in low-income developing regions, are aging. Young people typically don't want to be farming, and that challenge is even greater in the communities that we're focused on because of the lives of drudgery and hardship that their parents experience. And young people want to do something which involves new technologies, which involves faster rotation of cash in and out of their pockets so that they can pay for their cell phone data, for example, and other needs that they have. This is hard in these rural areas. There's too little opportunity. There are limits on access to land, limits on access to finance, limits on access to training and advice, other services like insurance, and of course, challenges on market access. So we ideally want the best of the young people with the best intentions for their communities to stay in those communities, but things have to change. And in particular, in the COVID period, this has been accentuated because of the challenges on mobility and loss of jobs. So many of the young people who've actually found jobs, maybe in the nearby towns and things, have then lost those jobs. And many programs that are designed to support entrepreneurs, including some of our own, have had to be postponed because of challenges in terms of mobility and needing to stay safe and healthy and so on. This has, on the other hand, opened up opportunities around digitalization, and in some of our programs we've now digitized and restarted those programs, which actually is a great thing for the future, because we can now take advantage of better technologies. But the immediate consequence of COVID, according to a survey that was carried out by Generation Africa that we're part of, showed that about 50% of young people had actually either temporarily ceased or permanently ceased their business activities, or seen some reduction in their business activities. So over to our panelists and researchers today to tell us some experiences they've had as they've looked at this space, and some thoughts about how to address these challenges. Thank you.
Thank you, Simon, for that introduction and overview. Our next speakers are Yuan Zhu and Suresh Babu, who will be co-presenting on key success drivers of youth entrepreneurship in agribusiness. And they will also be discussing broad country findings and insights from their collaborative work on this topic in Nigeria. Yuan leads Syngenta Foundation for Sustainable Agriculture's policy research and advocacy platform, and she also oversees their China program. Suresh Babu is a senior research fellow and head of capacity strengthening at IFPRI. Over to you, Yuan and Suresh.
Thank you, Nandita. It's a great pleasure and honor to be here today to present the methodology and the key results coming out of the joint research project between IFPRI and the Syngenta Foundation. Since last year, we have been working on a few country studies looking at the key drivers of youth entrepreneurship in agribusiness. And the work on Nigeria has been completed recently, and we will share the final report with all the participants after this webinar. And the work on India and Bangladesh and Indonesia are still ongoing. We will publish our report once available. I'd like to start with the motivation of the country studies. Next slide, please. Firstly, there has very high growth of youth population in developing countries, especially in Asia and Africa. In Africa, the youth population is projected to increase by 40% from now to 2030. And a lot of governments with increasing number of youth are struggling to educate their youth population and provide them with jobs and employment. As the rural youth population grows, there are huge opportunities to engage young people in agriculture and agribusiness, not only in the primary production, but also to engage them in other functions of the value chain, such as input supply, processing, marketing, and distribution. At the same time, we realize there is a need for rural and agriculture transformation to achieve sustainable development goals and to achieve national food security and nutrition security at the country level. And this requires private sector participation. So connecting these two drivers on youth and private sector, we see huge opportunities for youth entrepreneurship development. A lot of efforts have been made in the last decades. Many programs and initiatives from the government, from non-profit, donors, and private sector. But the efforts and the development remain fragmented and uncoordinated. So through our case study, we want to better understand the best practices on the ground, and also to understand the roles played by different stakeholders. And we want to draw lessons and recommendations for future policy and programs around youth entrepreneurship. Next, we have developed a conceptual framework for the country studies. Essentially, we categorize the contextual factors and drivers into 4 broad categories, including policy and enabling environment, institutional support, technology and infrastructure, and individual capabilities. And using this conceptual framework, we ran our case studies in all the 3 countries, and we conducted interviews with many young entrepreneurs. The aim is to collect and analyze the information and data for policy and program recommendations. Next. So now I'd like to share a few key drivers from each of these areas. On the policy and regulatory environment, we are looking at if a country has got a national youth policy or a youth strategy, or even like a youth development fund, and how these are designed and implemented in the country. We are also looking at the stage of development on the entrepreneurship ecosystem in a country. Another key driver is the access to finance, especially to low-cost credit and insurance. Many young entrepreneurs start up their business by borrowing money from their families and friends. But as soon as they enter the expansion phase, capital constraints become a huge limiting factor. Next. On the institutions and intermediary organizations supporting youth entrepreneurs, we pay special attention to access to knowledge and skill development. We also look at the roles of industry associations, youth associations, and farmer organizations, as well as the roles of technical and educational institutions in the youth entrepreneurship development. Next, on the technology and infrastructure space, we are looking at key drivers such as access to technology and its adoption by young people, and also access to information and knowledge, as well as access to rural infrastructure such as rural roads, logistics, transport, processing, storage facilities. A key driver I'd like to mention here is about digitalization. So connectivity and access to internet and to mobile data seems to be a crucial driver for young entrepreneurs, especially tech entrepreneurs who depend on this technology to promote their products and services. Next, but not the least, on the individual capacities. So here we are looking at entrepreneurs' incentives and motivation and their passion in agriculture and in starting up a business. And we are also looking at their education, their access to continuous learning, continuous skill development, as well as their attitude to business and access to mentorship, etc. So with this, I'd like to hand over to Suresh to share some country-specific insights. Suresh, over to you.
Okay, thank you very much, Yuan, and thank you, Simon, for giving a very good overview. And Yuan, thanks for giving that conceptual framework for presenting the issues, constraints, challenges facing youth entrepreneurship from a policy, institutional, and individual perspective. And what we did in the program of studying the countries that we will be presenting is basically use this conceptual framework to apply to individual case studies of the entrepreneurs in the countries themselves, going to their field, going to their location of the business, and interviewing them and studying each one of them in their own locality and context specific situations. But I will be presenting three kind of countries that we studied, and we'll start with Nigeria now. We'll be basically presenting broad set of the status presentation as well as the lessons that we have learned from these countries. In terms of Nigeria, where we have a report that after this presentation you will be able to download for your feedback and comments, and we have given it. Nigeria has a good set of policies and strategies that it has developed for youth development and youth entrepreneurship in general. But the challenge in the context of Nigeria is how to translate those strategies into specific investments for the youth to benefit from. And also in the Nigerian context, there is federal and the state kind of implementation system. Translating national policies into state level implementation is also a challenge. But however, the youth entrepreneurship ecosystem itself is slowly developing, so we need to watch that as we go along. Institutions are catching up in terms of supporting youth entrepreneurship, but the value chains are kind of poorly organized because they are scattered all over. But there are a lot of emergence of new value chains where youth can actually come and participate. But it is important that we make sure that the youth who enter into the agribusiness do not face a lot of risks and failures. That's something needs to be worked on in Nigeria. But let me come to specific lessons now. Next, Lucy. Nigeria particularly has a lot of lessons to share for rest of Africa. So that's one of the very good countries to study as a case study, because many things are happening in the policy front, but there are also many challenges. One of the things that we found out, in fact, the picture you see is a stakeholder consultation that we conducted in order to identify opportunities not only for youth but also agri-business opportunities. In fact, that's a meeting that brought together a set of ideas for youth working with the mentors. So the mentorship, particularly for youth who are starting, has to start from particularly the universities where the teaching is happening in agribusiness, for example. And for those who do not enter universities, the youth need hand-holding. Not only the skills and education are important, but they need to be equipped with other skills in order to enter the business. Initial capital seems to be a major constraint, but systematic access to initial capital will help more youth to come into entrepreneurship. And also, social capital is very key in the context of Nigeria. Unless you know people, it is very difficult to operate in a business and even to start a business. So social capital, how do we develop social capital? How do we network with other people is an important skill that we need to teach the young entrepreneurs. In that context, agri-business incubation centers can play a major role. It is just emerging slowly, but it can play a major role in order to bring the youth to the business, and the interface of that can happen in the incubation centers. So that's we should probably keep that in mind in the context of Nigeria. But also Nigerian youth are very well connected to digital and social media that can actually speed up the growth. Finally, looking for opportunities within the system, within the agricultural, within the food system itself, like extension, input delivery, seed and seed production, for example, and output aggregation and processing would be a good place where youth can enter. Let me move on to now Bangladesh. Lucy, please. Next slide, please. In Bangladesh, of course, it's a crowded place. A huge bulge of youth is available in the rural areas, but they all try to migrate to the urban cities, and we will see that why that is a constraint as well as an opportunity. But policies and strategies in Bangladesh have recognized agriculture as a key industry for growth, as well as role of youth in entrepreneurship. in the value chain. It has been high for some time, particularly the growth of agriculture in terms of value chains, aquaculture, fisheries, poultry, and agriculture has been growing in Bangladesh. And to commensurate with that, business ecosystem has also been growing, but it needs some additional support, but it's still inadequate. Agricultural output marketing, input supply are the key activities now youth are getting engaged. In Bangladesh, there is reasonable development of rural infrastructure, but it can be developed further because of the roads. Roads are connecting throughout the country, so the youth are able to take advantage of that. So that's one advantage compared to, for example, in Nigeria, reaching remote areas is very difficult. But youth participation in the rural areas itself is missing because of the high level urbanization. So we can actually think about how to take advantage of that in youth entrepreneurship development. Next slide, please. The specific lessons from Bangladesh are as follows. The national programs are effective in training rural youth. There are a lot of national programs by the government sponsored training programs. But the role of NGOs is also very important, and NGOs have played a key role in Bangladesh in building youth and youth entrepreneurship. But youth can benefit from more organized value chain operations. The picture you see is a picture of someone who is a youth who is developing a seedling nursery and selling it to the local farmers. So that's a starting point of a value chain. And then there is another youth who aggregate the products from the local farmers and take those products to the nearest urban center. That's another youth playing that role. And in the urban center itself, another youth is purchasing this and giving it to the retailers there. So another youth is involved there. So that throughout the value chain, how do we systematically landscape and identify opportunities for youth is very important. And Bangladesh gives very clear examples of that. But also thinking about agroecology and how we can develop value chains to connect youth is important. But there are a lot of emerging opportunities in Bangladesh that can connect to rural entrepreneurship as well. A lot more work to be done, but there are very key lessons from Bangladesh as well. Next, we move on to India. In Indian case, the recent policy changes, such as the removing of the Essential Commodity Act, also removing the monopoly of the local traders in the APMC Act, and also the improvement of the business associations for contract farming is also providing opportunities for youth to come in. In the Indian context, most of the youth are coming in with the support of the family. The institutional support in terms of credit is still lagging, but youth who have come into agribusiness, who have been able to successfully operate. We looked at the organization looked at 200 entrepreneurs, how they have come into the business. Most of them have come through family support and self-initiative. However, agribusiness centers have been created in most of the universities, agricultural universities, which are connected to the national banking system, which is helping a lot of youth to learn from the incubation centers. What has been helping in India also, the curriculum of the agribusiness in the universities have been driving youth into entrepreneurship. That's something that we can learn from India. And how do we inculcate the entrepreneurship as part of the curriculum and state level training programs that support agriculture. And there is quite a bit of subsidy that is given to youth that starts business in India, but availing that subsidy and making use of that still requires the skill building of the youth and bringing them to the social network, and also working them with the business associations in the local areas is very important. These are the lessons from India. And we broadly saw 3 different countries in 3 different, so to speak, growth stage in development, and how their policies and their institutions are supporting the youth and what needs to be done more. But we will be sharing the reports with you as we go along. Please watch out our websites. But let me at this point turn it over to Yuan to come and give us a closing kind of set of remarks that we have found from all these case studies. Thank you.
Yes. So what are the broader implications for developing countries? And a lot of these points have been mentioned by Suresh already. So I just want to add one final point. I think the government, non-profit, and the private sector all have very significant roles to play to support and developing youth entrepreneurship. and a multi-stakeholder approach is needed to make it happen. So with that, I will conclude this presentation. Thank you very much for your attention. Back to you, Nandita.
Thank you, Yuan and Suresh. The next speaker that we have today is Patrice Mirindi, who is an agricultural economist and currently works as an entrepreneur support associate at the Anzija Prize. It's a collaboration between the African Leadership Academy and the MasterCard Foundation. And Patrice will be talking about his experience of mentoring youth entrepreneurs in the African countries. Over to you, Patrice.
Thank you very much, Mandisa. As you have said, I am Patrice Mirindi. I'm from the Democratic Republic of Congo, and I'm currently working with the Anzija Prize as an entrepreneur associate. As an entrepreneur support associate, of course, actually Anzija Prize is a partnership between the African Leadership Academy and the MasterCard Foundation that seek to fundamentally and significantly increase the number of job generative entrepreneurs in Africa. Our goal, of course, is to inspire, support young Africans with leadership potential to pursue and succeed in entrepreneurship. And my work is mainly focused on working and supporting young entrepreneurs who are involved in agriculture all over Africa. So I'm going to share just some few lessons that I've learned since I was supporting them, and I will highly focus on the policy perspective and how the policy affects the business of young entrepreneurs. So the first aspect that I will raise is the access to finance, of course. So that has been very challenging to young entrepreneurs in agriculture on the continent to access to finance. And I would like us to consider two things. The first is that, of course, there are organizations that are willing to support young entrepreneurs, but they want to reduce the risks of losing that money at all costs. And what happened is that most of the time they focus on those entrepreneurs who have already have markets, who have already made profit, or those who have collateral. And I would like to want to give a quick example of an entrepreneur who have been affected by this. I work with an entrepreneur in Gambia who work in the horticulture sector. And especially when you're in the horticulture sector, you really want to have two things. You have to have adequate irrigation system and a storage facility. And the young entrepreneur has to go to different banks in Gambia to find credit, but none of the banks were willing to give him the credit just because he doesn't have a collateral and he didn't have a huge farm. I think he's working on a 2-hectare farm. So that is one of the challenges they face practically. And the other part comes to the terms that are given to young entrepreneur in agribusiness. So we know that agriculture is usually something that takes time to start producing. So some countries like Kenya, Uganda, where they've been able to provide credits to entrepreneurs, they also have the challenge of the payments. They take the loan today and the next month they start paying that loan. And it's hard for them. They can't be paying the loan and they've not starting producing or making profits. That have been the main challenges that I can raise on the credit part. The second part I will raise it more on the skills and training. So the good part of this is that, of course, I've been working with entrepreneurs and most of them have not didn't go for agriculture studies, but they've been doing agriculture and they've been doing it well. So that is a proof that, of course, for you to start an agriculture business, you don't really need to have the skills. But the challenge comes when you have to be competitive with other people outside. So when you need to be competitive, now you require to have access to technologies, to new technologies, and they need skills. They need to have the knowledge on how to use those technology in a more efficient way. And that has been a challenge. Of course, they start new businesses, but when they now want to be competitive and compete with other people who are outside the continent, or maybe with other entrepreneurs who have been in the agriculture sector for long, they get challenges, and that's why it's very important for them to have the skills that is relevant and that will enable them to succeed in what they are doing. So, and now I will try to raise the aspect of marketing and pricing. So here it's very important to understand how they struggle when it comes to having access to raw material and also the issues of infrastructures. So basically they produce in rural areas and they have to, of course, bring the product in cities. So what happened is that first, to get inputs, they are expensive, and the input that are available, sometimes they are not adequate. We have an entrepreneur, for example, in Benin, she's producing tomato puree, and that tomato puree required, and she wants to have purely organic. And now she's suffering. How is she going to get organic tomato available in the region? And it's very hard for her to get those tomatoes, but at least she's trying to, we are trying to work on that. But that's happened. What make it, and at the end of the day, all these issues of infrastructures, issues of getting raw materials, make them to have their product become very expensive on the market. And it's hard for them to compete with all the products that are coming from outside or are imported. So that is something that is really affecting the young entrepreneur on the continent. There is also the issue of perception. So we all know that when a product is of good quality, it sells itself. But there is also those minds on African products, especially the agricultural product that have already a bad reputation. So when they go to the market, the marketing part becomes very tough for them. And also there are, of course, today they talk about free trade, but there are a lot of non-tariff barriers of agriculture products that exist, and it's really affect them, especially when we talk about standardization of products. It's really challenging for them. So finally, I will also discuss on the issues with Chamber of Commerce. So basically, the roles was in different countries was to support young entrepreneurs, to inform them about the realities that is happening on the ground. But those Chamber of Commerce are not really working adequately. And what happened is that young people are not aware about everything that is happening on the market. So it's really make them producing sometimes, and they are not sure about where to sell. And when they have to sell, they are not sure about what will be the price. And all those challenges together make the journey a little bit tough, and the success become very difficult. So of course there are many other issues that exist on a policy perspective, but for me, I believe those are the 4 key that we should, policy makers should focus on trying to support very young entrepreneurs on the continent. So if I can just provide some recommendation, I think that I will start with the funding access. Of course, I think the different governments should be able to have some funds that is allocated to this aspect of, for young entrepreneurs in agriculture. Why? Because we, as I said, agriculture is something that takes time. So you don't make profit the same day you start planting. It's they need to have those kind of funding that can come either through grants or either through loan, depending on the case of each entrepreneur. So there is also the issue of access to credit. So it's not only giving them credit, but the credit organization, if they are banks, they also need to work with them to achieve their goals. Of course, they are young people. In Africa, we have a lot of uncertainty. We don't have adequate infrastructure, so there are a lot of difficulties that they need to face. Of course, they have the vision, they have the passion. So all those credits, they need, all those credit organizations need to work with the Chamber of Commerce and try to make sure that they have the adequate support even after they've received the money. And the second part, again, on the part of training and skills, of course, we need first to change the narrative on entrepreneurship and agriculture on the continent. So people should stop thinking about agriculture or entrepreneurship as the last thing to consider after everything has failed, because that has been most of the time the story when people have failed finding a job and they consider, now let me go to agriculture. So that needs to change so that people will understand that it's really important to make available all the support that is need it. Of course, the technology, as I said, there are lots of issues related to technology. So those technology doesn't need to just exist, but they have to be available in the continent, in the region of the entrepreneur, and of course, they need to be adapted to the context of the entrepreneur. And also, when it comes to training, of course, we need to make sure that I would even suggest that agriculture go to primary schools in all the African countries so that people will start to learn, have the skills that are adequate to succeed in agriculture. And of course, entrepreneurship also need to be introduced. Meanwhile, we need also to put parents and educators in this journey, because those young people live to their parents' place. They need the support of their parents so that they will be successful in what they do. So, and also on the agriculture support, of course, there are a lot of accelerators that are on the African continent. They try to provide support to entrepreneurs, but most of them focus on the financial part. They need to give them money. And here at Anzisha, we have been actively working to try to make sure that which framework we can use to provide even the technical support, because it's not only about money. After they've got the money, we need to make sure that they succeed also in their journey. So finally, as recommendation is more to allow them to have access to inputs and raw materials that will enable them. So the government need to make sure that those things are available for them, and everything in the supply chain have the adequate resources. So that will allow African products to have, of course, a competitive price. Young people will be able to make profit, because without profit, we can't just tell them to go to agribusiness and be willing to do it. And also they need to have platform that will inform them about the needs of the market, and also the exact price that is available on the market, so that they will be producing knowing how much they will earn at the end. So just as a conclusion, so here at Azisha Prize, we have realized that, of course, young people are more likely to hire other young people. So what does that mean? If we support young people in agriculture, it means that, and we all know that Africa is a young continent, and since they are willing to provide jobs to other young people as them, so the result will be like, it will lead to reducing unemployment on the continent. So as a closure, it's just to say that, of course, I believe that if we put adequate policies to support young entrepreneurs on the continent, they have the potential to innovate in agriculture, and they will change the agriculture in a way that we will be able to build successful businesses. Up to you, Nandita. Thank you.
Thank you, Patrice. Next, we have Mohammad Reza Ahmed Khan. He's a Senior Agricultural Marketing Officer with the Department of Agricultural Marketing in Bangladesh. He will provide key insights and recommendations for developing country government, not-for-profit organizations, and the private sector to support and strengthen youth entrepreneurship in agriculture. Over to you, Reza.
Thank you, Nandita, and welcome everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. So, to give my perspective about this youth entrepreneurship and agribusiness in the rural areas, our government's commitment is clear, because we can root back in 1978 when Youth Development Ministry was established first. And consequently, now the Department of Youth Development is working under presently the Ministry of Youth and Sports. And we have National Youth Policy 2017 that gives clear indication of government's commitment to develop youths and entrepreneurship in the country. There are certain provisions like developing banks for the youths, covering women, young people under banking and insurance schemes, and also establishing business incubator centers, providing them with special credit schemes, and also attaching them with these organizational development, organizational registration processes, all those things. There are many supports. And also the social youth welfare fund was created also to support them. And our Prime Minister is really committed. And Sheikh Hasina National Youth Development Institute is also established in 1998 as a center of excellence for developing the youth entrepreneurship in the country. And presently also the information management systems for the youth entrepreneurs is under development as far my knowledge goes. There are certain facilities that is provided to the youths like the group-based credit schemes where family members or close relatives can make groups and individuals can be given certain amounts, and they can be given also 3 times the loans. So and the interest rates is also like around 10%, and it is decreasing gradually. So there are individual credit programs also. Individual entrepreneurs can also can take the credit after completing certain training skill development programs. There are entrepreneurship development credit programs also specifically, which gives enterprise level credit facilities. So basically, all the supports and facilities can be categorized in terms of like financial supports, skill and knowledge development, and advisory and informational supports. So there are areas where more has to be done, of course, like the technology transfer part, and also like the linkage. Market linkage is one important part, because after developing the products, they have to sell those products, and the market linkage both to the consumer markets and to the industrial markets is needed to be done, and also the market expansion in abroad. Those are the areas that we have to also work on. The challenges that generally face is like knowledge gap or skill gap and financial problem that is common almost for all youth entrepreneurs. And also still now, though our government is committed to develop infrastructure and many institutions, still now in terms of needed things, we have to do more. And but in case of particular business, there could be challenges like access to land, particularly when we'll be talking about agribusiness or agri-production related entrepreneurship. Then there is the issue of conversion of agricultural land to other issues. So those are some challenges. There is also challenge of shortage of skilled labor, affordable technology. So those are the areas that we have to really work on. Under my own department, they have completed agribusiness development project, and we provide trainings to the youths on post-harvest management, marketing, value chain development, agribusiness development. So there are programs under the Ministry of Agriculture also, like in our national agriculture policy, we have also a commitment to develop the agribusiness sectors and youths and women particularly. So those policy supports are there, but still now, what is my insight from my experience, that I think there is some areas that we have to improve on more, like the projects and the programs that has to be communicated better. And there has to be promoted more so that the coverage can be increased. And another challenge that we see, that to scale up the startups, we need to provide more financial products, and basically the risk management part, the insurance products, that has to be really worked on. And another aspect that should be taken into consideration, because youth entrepreneurship development is a versatile works, I think. So throughout the value chain, there has to be multiple parties, the stakeholders involvement. So there should be more coordination among public and private, and also the development partners, and more integrated planning is needed so that more focused program development is possible, which would be sustainable for the youth's entrepreneurship development. And as some also mentioned before, that agribusiness sometimes there has some sorts of social stigma, that it is taken as a last resort for somebody. So there has to be promotional side. It has to be motivated, and market linkage has to be established. Then these programs would become much more successful in terms of coverage and in terms of scaling up the startups. There are also other ministries involved in developing the youth and the entrepreneurship. Like from the Prime Minister's office, there is Access to Information project, which is now converted as Aspire to Innovation. So under those programs, there are many incubation and business idea development, application development, which were targeted specifically to agriculture. So ICT technology in agriculture is a vast area that is coming also. So those are the opportunities where we can tap more of the youths of the country to take the trajectory of entrepreneurship development. In a nutshell, I think developing countries, a government should focus on valuing up the skilled workforce. Simply say, for example, a mechanization, agriculture mechanization is going up. So there is possibilities that youth entrepreneurs can get into this trajectory as more machines will be required. So there will be requirement of skilled labor to repair and maintain those machineries too. So those are the new avenues coming up where government can focus more, and entrepreneurship development can bring out the necessary development pathways and reduce the unemployment rate also. In a nutshell, as Bangladesh is having a really demographic dividend, because we have almost 50% of our youths, so it's around 55%. In the rural areas, it's around 71%. So it has to be taken more seriously and focus should be given. Thank you. Get back to you, Nandita.
Thank you, Reza. Our next speaker is Rajendra Jog, who is the CEO of Agri Entrepreneur Growth Foundation based in India. He will be talking about his experience on working in a not-for-profit on youth issues. Over to you, Rajendra.
Thank you, Nandita. It is indeed a pleasure to have this opportunity to express some of my thoughts in this forum today. The thoughts would be mainly related to Agri Entrepreneurship program that we run in India. Let me first introduce my organization, AEG Foundation. Agri Entrepreneur Growth Foundation, as it is known, was set up jointly by Syngenta Foundation, Tata Trust, and IDH to scale up agri entrepreneurship model. We call it AE model. AEG Foundation works with unemployed rural youth in villages and trains them to become agri entrepreneurs. Let's understand the rationale behind starting this initiative. We strongly believe that inefficient last mile delivery of products and services is one of the key reasons for low income of smallholder farmers. To address this challenge, this AE program was initiated, under which we develop village level hyper-local entrepreneurs to provide services and products to small farmers. It is actually a micro entrepreneurship, and AE is expected to provide services to about 150 to 200 smallholder farmers. Under this program, each AE provides services such as access to credit, market linkages, access to high quality inputs, and farm advisory support to the farmers. These services were not accessible to smallholder farmers earlier. Let's look at the current status of our AE program. The program, which we started in 2014, actually underwent several iterations, and the model now, I would say, is fairly standardized. As on date, we have about 3,200 agri entrepreneurs and about 100 AE mentors. Through these agri entrepreneurs, we are connected to 350,000 smallholder farmers in 7,000 villages across 11 states in India. And our goal is to set up 100,000 agri entrepreneurs in next 5 years, which will then allow us to connect to 20 million smallholder farmers. So that's quite an ambitious goal, but it's definitely doable. The program, once scaled up, will significantly help in increasing income for millions of smallholder farmers and creating sustainable livelihood for tens of thousands of unemployed rural youth. This AE program is now a platform where all partners and AEs can seamlessly engage. This actually brings in more efficiency and additional value creation to agri-entrepreneurs, farmers, as well as network managers and private sectors. Uh, in my view, the key contributing factors for the successful rural youth entrepreneurship in India are three. One, it is about careful selection and after screening of the village youth from a compact cluster, who are then trained as agri-entrepreneurs. Their training and capacity building, including quality and content of the training, which covers agronomy, soft skills, and business skills. Second is the mentoring and handholding, is an extremely important factor. One mentor is assigned to every 25 to 30 agri-entrepreneurs, and he does mentoring for a period of 2 years. As these rural youth are first-time entrepreneurs, they need support on every aspect. Just to give an example, if they are not able to procure a product, the mentor steps in and connects them to the right distributor to avail it. And the third important contributing factor is partner ecosystem approach rather than just focusing on training the entrepreneurs, which is what happens in many of the programs which are running today or have been done in the past. We have more than 100 partners, including input companies, market off-takers, banks, financial institutions, NGOs, etc. In our endeavor, we have good support from government, institutions, and private networks. The government is helping us in many ways. They basically provide certification for the training that we conduct. They help in creating policy for enabling entrepreneurship, funding the programs in some states where we work with state livelihood missions, and providing subsidies and support for infrastructure development, such as nurseries, market collection centers, etc. As regards the support from private sector, I think market off-takers and financial institutions have a vital role to play, and they do provide great support to this initiative. Some companies are exploring this channel and might eventually make this mainstream for selling their products. In fact, there are companies who would like to focus on selling services rather than just the products. Example is spraying entrepreneur who provides a service because it's also important to demonstrate the safety protocols and the stewardship aspect while conducting the spraying services. NGOs have also been very supportive because of their local connect. I think they are able to identify right rural youth for these initiatives to be trained as entrepreneurs. They also provide us infrastructure for conducting training programs, and they play an important role in training farmers and modernizing farming practices, which eventually lead to the business of agri-entrepreneurs. Let's look at some of the challenges faced by young entrepreneurs. Access to credit, I would say, is still a significant challenge, and we also saw it when Yuan presented uh, for an agri-entrepreneur to grow his business. Most of them do not have credit score and credit history, so banks are skeptical and reluctant to advance credits. We are mitigating this issue by developing credit scores and also providing first loss guarantee to banks so that they can fund our agri entrepreneurs. Climate change, adequate water availability, access to irrigation is another major challenge for agriculture, food security, and hence livelihood of a smallholder farmer, which in turn would impact the livelihood of young entrepreneurs as well. Policy framework in some cases, such as getting licenses for setting up the business, could also be a challenge and would need an improvement. Before I conclude, based on my Indian experience and key insights, I would like to make few recommendations to the governments of developing countries, non-profit organizations, and also NGOs, which will help to support and strengthen the young entrepreneurship. Efficient last mile delivery of agriculture, services, and products is a key to agriculture and rural transformation. Youth entrepreneurship is the only option to ensure that this happens. Governments must facilitate credit and create enabling policy framework. Essentially, they should provide some what we call as ease of doing business for youth to become agri-entrepreneurs. The private sector should embrace this idea and engage with rural youth in villages rather than continuing with their existing channels and NGOs, existing channels. As regards NGOs, I think they should lead this effort and be the lead partners in facilitating this to create entrepreneurial ecosystem. At the end, I would just once again like to reiterate that no one agency or foundation can deliver this mammoth task, but working with all like-minded partners in the ecosystem, we can certainly achieve this rural transformation through our fleet of well-trained and motivated agri-entrepreneurs. Thank you very much.
Yes. Thank you, Rajendra. Before I introduce our last speaker for the day, I'd like to remind everyone to feel free to submit your questions in the questions box. We will have about 20 minutes of Q&A. If the question is for a specific presenter, please specify this. Last but not the least, our next speaker is Olubami Adarinsola Agbato, who's a youth entrepreneur working in the field of aquaculture in Nigeria. She will talk about factors contributing to her success as a youth entrepreneur, the challenges she has faced during setting up and expanding her business. Over to you, Olubami.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. My name is Olubumi Agbato, and I'm an entrepreneur operating in Ibadan, Oyo State, Nigeria. I'm the CEO for Bee Spice Fish Global Products, an aquaculture industry, and is one of the fastest growing industry in Nigeria, known for its quality fish production. We are into fish processing, although we do a little bit of farming also. But because of so many challenges, which I'll get to that part soon, because of so many challenges, we have in our company decided that most of our home fish will be sold as a value-added product. I mean, we will be selling it out after we must have put one or two value addition before selling out. And also, we do not want to sell our fish fresh because we do not have enough yet. And also, if we add value, we'll be able to maximize our profit. So, moving on, I will quickly talk about the products that we have been able to achieve from fish. We have the fish powder, the fish crackers, fish cookies, we have cooking fillets, we have the popular has been widely acceptable, especially by children, lactating mothers, and all of that. Additionally, we train individuals, we train groups, and we train fellow entrepreneurs that are willing to learn about valuation. And one of the key contributing factors to the success of our company, although we are still growing using the Instagram, using our websites, we have been able to use that to market our products a lot. And with that, we are reaching out to a large number of people, even outside of our own locality, outside of our own community. Also, one of the key contributing factors for me is the training. I recently graduated from the University of Ibadan, where I got my training on aquaculture, marketing, and product development. I did aquaculture and fisheries at my first degree, and marketing and product development for my MSc, which I just graduated from. Also, one other major thing that I realized that has helped us a lot is being creative. Yes, what do I mean by being creative? We try to produce fish that are not the usual from what is already available in the market. I mean, we try to do something different and something that you can easily find on the shelf. We try as much as possible to put a lot of shelf life, something that can last on the shelf, something that we do what I will call post-harvest preservation processes to avoid losses in the aquaculture industry. Another thing that has helped us is our emphasis and the little bit of sensitization we are doing as to the importance of fish intake. And moving on, consistency and passion. Consistency and passion. I've been doing this along my team consistently with so many challenges. Nonetheless, we have refused to stop doing it. That's on a lighter note. We have faced a lot of challenges, but then we are still in the business. We are still doing it despite all the challenges. So far, so good. We have not gotten any support from the government. We have not gotten any support from any institution per se, but we have gotten from an NGO sometimes, like a seed grant, which is meant for us to use to practicalize and see if really we can do this thing before they now think about, additional increase in the grant, whereby we can now expand and do more. I got support from the university. That is where I got my technical training from. And my entrepreneur journey has also provided opportunity for me with some other organization whereby I'm asked to come and, say something about my product, share my challenges and things that I've done, like this type of opportunity now. Moving on to the challenges we have faced so far. Number one challenges that is common to every agriculture industry is the finance. I say again, is the finance. It's actually very unfortunate that having learned this field of work, having gone through it for years, you still come out of the university to start like somebody who has not passed through any form of education, because this industry is actually it involves high investment. I mean, it is highly capital intensive. It is highly capital intensive. And if we are going like this, it only means that we are going to start small and remain small, which is what we don't want to do. We know some of the things that will help us to actually move higher. But some policies, although we have policies in Nigeria, but there are some enforcement that needs to be done to that policy in terms of price regulation to our produce, in terms of marketing. Sometimes we don't have like off-takers. You see people who cannot even do the products as much as we can do it, following the level of hygiene and other things that we follow. But because they have some form of will I say backup, you see them penetrating other markets that you should penetrate. And because of lack of infrastructures, that there are some, for instance, storage facilities such as freezing and so many others. There are some facility that is needed for a food fish processing company. They are always very capital intensive. Talking about having a constant power supply, you can't do without that. A lot of things, because we deal with perishable. Talking about fish, we deal with perishable. So these are challenges, and getting funds, getting money to do all these things is actually difficult, quite difficult. Some grants are available, but the question is, are they easily accessible to small and micro entrepreneurs? No. You are asked to bring something you do not have as something you will use to stand to collect loan from the bank, things like that. Another challenge I faced while practicing is the cumbersome process of certification. For instance, we want to certify our product so that we can reach a large number of people. We have a way of doing different sizes whereby we can meet the low income earners, medium income earners, and the large income earners. But we realize that we could not expand beyond the little weight that we have, because we do not have some facility that we will use to produce in large quantity to meet all this demand. The market is quite available, but we can't meet up all this market because of certifications, because of certification. And Practically on the field, another challenge I faced is communal disputes that happens between we, the farmers, and other land users. For instance, managing the waste that we generated from our industry. So those are some of the things that we have faced. Also, inadequate land. For instance, I have a challenge. I think it's rather peculiar to being a woman, and that is when you want to get land in Nigeria. Being a woman, you are rather asked to go through your husband or some other, that gender thing is also there. So moving on, I will advise or recommend that the government should do a kind of price standardization. And when these policies are made, they should be enforced. They should be enforced properly. The certification process should be less cumbersome. There should be some that would be for maybe a small micro enterprise, small to medium enterprise, medium to large scale enterprise, so that we all are not in the same problem, and we have not even finished sorting out the problems that is on table that are peculiar to us, and we're already facing problem of how do I pay tax, I have to pay my tax, a lot. Because of our time, I will move on. I will also recommend that the private institutions should come up with sensitization programs, like sensitization programs that can help other people to know more about the products, first of all, and then it will jeer other youth entrepreneurs to do aquaculture, because as some people are willing to join, a lot of people who have tasted the challenges and have seen a little bit of it are running away from the business. You see a lot of farms that are condemned and so many other things. I will also say that they should create a small holding facility whereby that graduates will go and the graduates can go practicalize, and you'll be sure that this person can actually do this thing very well when he or she gets to the field. So those are the things that are needed to be done if we create a small facility. And then the institution, my recommendation to the institution is that they should create entrepreneurship program in their curriculum, whereby right from university you are learning something, you're being practical as if you're already in the business. Entrepreneurship should be in the curriculum right from the beginning to your final year in the university. And the institution can also work hand in hand with government, with the NGO, so that they'll be able to help source for this fund, knowing that students or youth cannot go, but if they go as a group, if they have support hand in hand with this, with government, they can use that to assist youth entrepreneurs. Thank you very much. I will also I'm sorry, Nandita, I know you're trying to round me up because of my time. I will also tell my fellow youth entrepreneurs that are listening to me that it is very important to be available. You can't run this enterprise, especially being an aquaculturist, without being available. You have to be available, and then you have to be persistent, be a creative, and get the right mentorship. Thank you very much. Over to you, Nandita.
Thank you so much, Olubami. Now it's time to open up for Q&A. I'd like to invite all of the speakers to turn on their webcams and keep them on for the remainder of the event. We ask the audience members to continue submitting their questions through the question box, and we'll do our best to address them. So I will now start by giving out the first question. Patrice, here is a question for you by Nitesh Agnihotri, who is asking, what are the challenges in converting traditional agricultural practices into technology-based farming and ensuring that youth adopt such strategies? So from your experience in Africa, if you could respond to this question. Over to you, Patrice. This is a question from Nitesh Agnihotri, who's asking, what are the challenges in converting traditional agricultural practices into technological-based farming and ensuring that youth adopt such strategies?
Okay, thank you very much for that question. I think that I think even our young people, the good part with young people is that they are always willing to use new technologies. They are always willing to apply new techniques that are coming. But the challenge, especially in the production part, is that the information is not translated to them. They are not trained about it. And if you can see in many young people in agriculture, especially on the production part and in rural areas, and they have connectivity issues. So there are a lot of challenges that happen and in terms of them getting the information. So I believe the best way to make them use new techniques is just to make sure that they get the right information, but they are really willing to apply them.
Thank you so much, Patrice. The next question is for Rajendra. This question is coming in from Dolopo Adiyaunji, who's a PhD student at the University of Nairobi and also a research intern at the International Institute of Tropical Agriculture. And in the same theme is another question from Mosmi Das. So here is a combined question for you, Rajendra. What are some of the issues you think have come up in terms of the extent to which a career path for young people can be directed towards agriculture, seeing that the current youth entrepreneurs experience has been challenging and in some cases disappointing as well? Over to you, Rajendra.
Yeah, thanks for the question. If I understand it correct, I think the question is, do we find difficulty in getting people working in the field of agriculture, right?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
Okay. Yeah, I think educated youth today have lots of other opportunities, and traditionally agriculture has not been doing so well. As officer from Bangladesh explained, it's still bit of a area where it's seen as last resort for young today's youth, unless he has a family business and he just one or two children in that business, then he tends to get into agriculture. But if it is say 3 or 4 children, then the land holding in India is so small. Average land holding in India is 1.15 hectares. Yeah, and that's true with about 90% of the total farmers in India. So in such a small land holding, if you have number of children and therefore the income to be divided 3 times or 4 times, then it is not worth having that kind of an opportunity. And therefore, some of them would like to get better education, go to cities, go to states where they can earn their livelihood through jobs. But this is exactly where we are encouraging this agri-entrepreneurship, that even if he does not want to work in his own farm, he can support about 200 farmers, where by providing inputs, by providing access to credit, by their market linkages, in each of that activity, he earns a commission. And over a period of 2 years of handholding and incubation that I talked about, after that he starts earning a decent livelihood, especially when he is staying in his own village, in his own property. He can also do a bit of agriculture when the opportunity is there, but he also supports 200 farmers. And that is where we have started a kind of reverse flow, where village youth, when they see their friends getting into entrepreneurship and seeing that they are earning better livelihood, they tend to get attracted and join our training program and entrepreneurship program. And that is exactly the way we are promoting our program, AE program. Yeah.
Thank you, Rajendra, for responding to that question. Now I have a question for you, Reza, from Tushar Pandey, who's an advisor in financial policy and services at Grant Thornton, Bharat and Bihar. His question is, what's the level of technology-led financial services delivery, such as AgTech and FinTech in Bangladesh? Over to you, Reza.
Thank you, Nandita. If I understand the questions correctly, that I mean, is it about agriculture and technology transfer? and financial
in
inclusion.
the context of financial services.
Yeah, I understand. So in a nutshell, there are a lot of credit supports in the agriculture sector too, particularly for the mechanization part. Now government is really committed to increase our mechanization, and also as Mr. Rajendra also put it nicely, that agriculture is really we need to add more value on the agriculture. So we are focusing more on the processing and value chain development parts, high value agricultural parts, and as I mentioned, the mechanization part. So there are incentives, there are government policies to support those areas. But I think private sector can come up with financial products too, because it's a multi-partite ecosystem actually. So everyone has to get involved. Also, as Mr. Razet also said, that it's not a job for a single entity. Like in my country, Department of Youth Development is the business allocated organization mandated for youth entrepreneurship development. But obviously, as we see that there are many linkages with the ICT sector, with the agriculture, with many other sectors, fisheries and others. So there has to be this integration of projects or programs, whatever is there. And particularly for the financial products and technological products, there has to be those linkages where government is playing their part, but to scale up, to make it more available, private sector should get into this area, and development partners, they have also their roles to play. I think in Bangladesh there is IFSC who also finance certain private entrepreneurships in this respect. So is that answered correctly?
Yes, thank you so much, Reza. Moving on, the next question is for Olu by Esselin Shaw from Todarok, who's a master's student in the International Environmental Studies at the Norwegian University of Life Sciences. His question is that, we often hear a mention of the importance of market linkages, but nobody really seems to address these issues. Is there any way or any advice that you could give for ensuring that there is better creation and insurance of market linkages for youth entrepreneurs? Over to you, Olu.
Thank you very much. If I understand the question very well, it means that is there a market whereby you can take this produce to, or how do you market what you have produced? Is that the question?
Yes, correct.
Okay, so I will give you an example here. In my company, we use digital marketing, but then if you produce so much, there's something that operates in Ogun State, southwestern part of Nigeria here. There's something they call a fish community. It's like a fish village. So when you produce, and maybe you produce in groups, you can actually take this produce to that place and sell. All the other farmers that are operating in that place sells the same price. So it means that you have to belong to an association, and in that association, you have to follow their rules and regulations, and you sell at the price. They have the type of meat size that they use for those in the fishery industry, and for people that are the aquaculture industry, they have different prices for different sizes. So there are markets. There are markets for products if you're talking about aquaculture products, and there are off-takers, and that fish community is a good example. Thank you.
Thank you, Olu, for answering that question. I would like now to turn it over to Suresh. A question has come up asking about the mention of new policies in the area of youth entrepreneurship in agriculture in the Indian context. And the audience member would like to know what specific modifications or development have happened in the recent years which could increase opportunities for youth entrepreneurs in India. Over to you, Suresh.
Okay, that's a very good question. And I started off in the Indian case study. I started off with the new policy measures that have been put in place in the last actually 1 or 2 months and that gives enormous amount of opportunity for rural youth to come in. But with respect to specific opportunities, one would think about this APMC Act that has been liberalized now, immediately gives youth in the rural areas to get in the output aggregation. And also connecting the outputs to the processing industries, for example. They can also get involved in value chains that are developing in various parts of the country. And also the other policy that is liberalized or emphasis has been given in terms of investments in the producer organizations, the contract farming, and these are all opportunities right away that youth can jump in. But what is the major challenge I see right now is these policies, they have to be implemented at the state level. And the state level institutions, state level organizations to develop youth at the state level is not ready yet, at least in most of the states. So that is the next step we have to invest in. And some of us are talking to the state level policy makers on that. And we need to, at least in the Indian context, show to 4 to 5 states that have taken these policies, the national policies, and have used them for the benefit of the youth entrepreneurs. Then it will catch up like a wildfire. In fact, the program that Rajendra is using can also think about that in terms of how at the panchayat level, how at the group village level, at the mandi level, for example, when the mandi is dismantled, so to speak now, how can we bring in the youth in order to take over the roles? But that requires special training for business skills training, social skill training, and organizational training for youth. You know, they can't just say go and do it, you know. So policy is there, go do it. No, it's not going to happen. So we need to be organizing ourselves to bring the youth to the opportunity. So that's something that we need to do in India. Let me stop here.
Thank you so much, Suresh, for that. And just to be respectful of everyone's time, I'm now going to pose the final question to Yuan before closing this session. Yuan, this question is from Moshfikal Talukdar, who's asking that, you know, youth are becoming the vehicle of agribusiness in possibly in the next decade, and we'd like to focus on partnership ecosystem where digitization and agri-mechanization would be the best way to transform agriculture. In this context, has SFSA taken any steps with regard to youth in this ecosystem and agri-mechanization? Over to you, Yuan.
Thank you, Nandita, for the question. So this is a very good question. And Syngenta Foundation has been active in both the digitalization space and also the mechanization space due to higher labor cost of doing agriculture in Asia and Africa. So mechanization is becoming a trend for farmers to save cost, and especially labor cost, and improve efficiency in their work. So in both Senegal and Mali, we have a big program called SEMA program, where we help local farmer union and farmer association to set up a service which they can provide mechanization services to farmers with their tractors and other combined harvester and other agriculture mechanization machines. And in Senegal especially, so farmers could plant 2 times the rice because of the mechanization. So this way they can increase their income dramatically. And digitalization, so in our India and Bangladesh program, both the youth entrepreneur programs in Bangladesh is Farmers Hub, India is Agri Entrepreneur. We try to leverage digital platform and digital software to record the data on the farmer level and also the sales and marketing data to facilitate decision making, and also to leverage these digital services for the entrepreneurs to be able to check their revenue cost, etc., to make the model more sustainable. Over to you, Nandita.
Thank you so much, Yuan. I'd now like to wrap up the session by starting by thanking all of our speakers for their remarks and our audience for attending this event. If you'd like to send in comments or questions about today's webinar, please feel free to contact Suresh and Yuan. You can now see their contact details appearing on your screen. You can also contact Lucy Tolbert. Her contact details are available in the events registration email that you received. As a reminder, the event recording and slides will be available on IFPRI's events page. And I would now like to thank everyone again, and please have a great day. Thank you for joining us today.